Good afternoon, everyone. I will be presenting our data on does diastolic pressure gradient predict persistent pulmonary artery hypertension after shunt closure. Pulmonary hypertensive vascular disease is defined as a mean pulmonary artery pressure of more than 25 millimeters of mercury with a pulmonary vascular resistance index of 3 Wood units. Patients with congenital heart disease having intracardiac shunts are at an increased risk of developing pulmonary arterial hypertension. Among those patients with unoperated congenital arterial heart disease with intracardiac shunts because of persistence of PAH and an elevated PVRI over a period of time due to reversal of shunt develop Eisenmenger syndrome. Patients with persistent pulmonary artery hypertension after corrective surgery is a major concern as majority of the studies have shown that it is very difficult to correct it. This is mainly seen in patients with late presentations who undergo cardiac repair later or are diagnosed or at a later stage, thereby already having established pulmonary hypertensive vascular disease. Studies have shown that these patients have poorer prognosis as compared to their Eisenmenger's counterparts. Thus, it is important to predict the persistence of pulmonary hypertension before subjecting these patients to a corrective surgery. This is a Kaplan-Meier chart showing that patients who are subjected to cardiac surgery and have persistent pulmonary arterial hypertension after shunt closure have a poorer prognosis as compared to the patients without shunt closure. Majority of our patients present to us at an earlier stage have evidence of left to right shunt, cardiomegaly and signs of increased pulmonary blood flow on X-ray and echocardiographic evidence of left to right shunt, thereby falling in the operable subgroup. A small subset of patients present at an older age group have clearer evidence of shunt reversal resulting from a high PVRI, show no signs of cardiomegaly and peripheral pruning, and echocardiographic evidence of right to left shunt, thereby falling in the inoperable subgroup. But there is a small subset of patients whose the data is inconclusive by X-ray, the clinical features and echocardiography, thereby are subjected to invasive methods like cardiac catheterization to determine operability. Cardiac catheterization is the gold standard to determine operability in borderline cases. The main cardiac parameters like pulmonary artery pressures, systemic and pulmonary blood flows, ratios, and pulmonary vascular resistance index and ratio of pulmonary to systemic vascular resistance index are calculated. Acute vasodilator testing is the added acute vasodilator testing is done to determine the operability in these patients where inhaled nitric oxide is a drug of choice as it mainly acts as a pulmonary vasodilator with less effect on the systemic vasodilation. A positive vasodilator test is defined as more than 20% fall in the mean pulmonary artery pressure and PVRI with no change or increase in cardiac output. But there are various limitations which we see in the cardiac catheterization and in acute vasoreactive testing. Like cardiac output and vascular resistance are highly sensitive to changes in blood flow and pressure. In shunt lesions, accurate measurements of oxygen consumption is prudent for calculating the cardiac output, and majority of the times it is assumed. Pulmonary venous saturations are assumed in absence of an interatrial communication. Diastolic pressure gradient. What is diastolic pressure gradient? It is the difference between the diastolic pulmonary artery pressure and the mean pulmonary artery wedge pressure. It is a cardiac output independent parameter and thus it is immune from the inherent limitation of Fick's principle. Studies in adult population have shown that diastolic pressure gradient can identify out of proportion pulmonary hypertension who have significant pulmonary vascular disease and an increased mortality. No such studies have yet been conducted in pediatric populations and in patients with congenital heart disease with pulmonary hypertension. With this background, we aim to identify a reliable and reproducible parameter on cardiac catheterization which would predict the presence of pulmonary artery hypertension after shunt closure. This was a retrospective analysis which was done in patients with ventricular septal defects who were thought to have borderline operability, were subjected to cardiac cath and thought to be operable after the results. They were subjected to surgical closure between a period of 2011 to 2014. They were followed up for a minimum of 2 years after the surgery. Patients with complex congenital heart disease like single ventricle, large shunt at great artery level, moderate to severe pulmonary regurgitation, and ventricular dysfunction were excluded from the study. All the patients were assessed for following parameters 2 years after surgical closure: WHO functional class. Echocardiography was used to determine the presence of pulmonary hypertension in all the patients. A right ventricular systolic pressure of more than 40 millimeters of mercury by TR jet or mean pulmonary artery pressure of more than 25 millimeters of mercury by pulmonary regurgitation jet were considered as presence of pulmonary hypertension. A total of 17 patients were registered for the study. The presence of pulmonary hypertension was determined from echocardiography. They were divided into 2 groups. Group 1 consisted of 10 patients who were found to have persistent pulmonary hypertension, and Group 2 consisted of 7 patients who did not have pulmonary hypertension. So Group 1, out of the 10 patients, 8 patients were in functional class 2 and 2 patients were in functional class 3. 8 out of 10 patients were on dual therapy of endothelin receptor antagonist and phosphodiesterase 5 inhibitors, and 2 patients were on PDE5 inhibitors alone. In Group 2, 7 patients had no PAH on echocardiography, were in functional class 1 and without any cardiac medications. So this is a slide showing the results where the demographic parameters of both the groups were compared, and it showed that there was no statistical significance among the demographic parameters in the 2 groups. This is a slide showing the baseline preoperative cardiac catheterization data. Here we found that mean pulmonary artery pressure, diastolic pulmonary artery pressure, PVRI, diastolic pressure gradient, and mean pulmonary to aorta ratio were statistically significant. Since all these parameters were statistically significant, to determine the best parameter among them, a receiver operating curve was obtained, and it was found diastolic pressure gradient to be highly sensitive and specific with an area of 0.85 under the curve. Similarly, as Dr. Prashant had shown, this is a box chart which shows the mean with 2 standard deviations of patients with and without pulmonary hypertension in diastolic pressure gradient as well as PVRI. It shows that diastolic pressure gradient, the difference is significant and there is no significant overlap among the two. Whereas in PVRI, the PVRI at 6 could not predict the presence of persistent pulmonary hypertension, and there was a significant overlap which was seen among the 2 groups. Similarly, diastolic pressure gradient and PA to aorta systolic pressures, box chart of 2 standard deviations, shows that again there was even if statistically significant, there was a considerable overlap among the 2 groups. As diastolic pressure gradient is a new parameter, we did not have a cutoff value to determine what could be called as high. Hence, we found sensitivity and specificity at different values of diastolic pressure gradient, and found that at 18 it had a sensitivity of 90 with a specificity of 85.71. Similar can be seen under receptor operating characteristic curve. Why did we choose DPG? So it was a cardiac output independent parameter immune to the inherent limitation of fixed principle. The difference between diastolic pulmonary artery pressure and pulmonary artery wedge pressure in normal subject is usually very small, and this difference increases with development of pulmonary vascular disease and is more pronounced when the pulmonary artery pressure is mean pulmonary artery pressure is more than 40. It has its own limitations, which are catheter motion artifacts due to fluid-filled catheters. Inadequate wedging of pulmonary artery can overestimate pulmonary capillary wedge pressure and thereby giving a falsely low diastolic pressure gradient. And it's uncertain in the use in patients with a large shunt at great artery level. To conclude, we found that higher diastolic pressure gradient of more than 18 was more sensitive and specific marker to predict pulmonary hypertension 2 years after shunt closure. If validated further, it may emerge as an important marker to determine operability in patients with congenital heart disease and pulmonary hypertension. The limitations of the study: it was a retrospective study and hence the inherent limitations of the same. It was a small sample size and also the follow-up period was limited for 2 years. It would warrant a multicentric study with a larger population and a longer duration of follow-up to really prove that diastolic pressure gradient could be considered as an important parameter to predict persistent pulmonary hypertension after shunt closure. Thank you.
Because doing a transeptal puncture and getting a LA pressure is small. I don't know the feasibility of doing that.
Bridging in the presence of severe PH itself has a lot of fallacies.
All the patients doing a
I want to congratulate you on a really nice study, and probably a very simple marker if it's validated without complex equipment required. But just from a mechanistic point of view, do you think the diastolic pressure gradient performed better than the resistance? Do you think that's driven by the fact that it's just harder to measure resistance, and if you could measure resistance precisely, there would be no difference? Because a lot of people think the resistance and compliance of the vascular bed are intimately linked, and as one goes up, the other one goes down. They're inversely proportional. So do you think it's just a matter of you found a way of eliminating a measurement error? Or do you think there's something more specific about diastolic pressure gradient?
I think the cardiac output thing, I mean, it has its own inherent limitations, and especially where we're not measuring the oxygen consumption, going by a particular number of PVRI to assessing operability is difficult. As compared to that, this is a more simpler and gives you an objective, and without going into the details of calculation and errors of calculation, errors of sampling, it probably prevents all that. And maybe one of the reasons why it is why there is the overlap is much less when you compare it with PVRI. But only time will. I think 18 is still a very high number. It's a very high number. Maybe it was the follow-up period was just 2 years, so maybe that's why. If you look longer, there may be some more who would be transitioning to the other side. So only time will tell.
I think 2 years is pretty good follow-up, but
This is basal. This study is just basal. We're looking at the basal.
as you build up more data, it might be interesting to look at the effect of
sir.
heart rate as well, because
It was a
with the
single
same vascular bed, you can affect the diastolic pressure gradient by giving a tachycardia or bradycardia.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You were saying something. You just said something. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, as you build up more data, it will be interesting to look at the effect of heart rate, because you can have the same vascular bed with a tachycardia, your diastolic pressure gradient would go up, and with the bradycardia, your diastolic pressure gradient
I
will go
think
down.
in that context, Anuradha is here. Anuradha Sridhar. She's published a study, and you were the paper came out from your institution, and you valued. I remember reviewing it before it was published, and firstly you found that resting data is much more meaningful than post-oxygen data, and it's much more predictive of outcomes. But I'm curious, did you look at diastolic pressure gradient in that study? You looked at the transpulmonary gradient. You didn't look at the TPG. You didn't look at the diastolic pressure gradient, right? Can you pull out the data again and see if you can get, because you had the raw data, it's going to be easy to determine that, because we didn't think of it at that time.
There were 30 patients.
Yes, it's a good number. And I think there's another study that Kannan published that I again reviewed and came out from, showed the similar data. That is that the basal resting data is far more predictive than post-oxygen, than post-nitric oxide. None of those numbers really seem to help other than the basic basal data, the basal QPQS. That was what was most useful. And I think neither of those studies looked at the diastolic pressure gradient. And this is a useful, we can pull it out, and I think this can be easily pooled. I mean, you must be having hundreds of thousands of patients in All India Institute, and this is really worth looking at because it's really a simple gradient, simple index, and it might be useful in our circumstance to actually look at it.
Thank you, Dr. Sylvia, for the thought-provoking